শ্যামা মা কি আর কালো রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো, লোকে বলে কালো কালো, আমার মন তো বলে না কালো রে, কালো রূপে দিগম্বরী, কালো রূপে দিগম্বরী, হৃদি পদ্ম করে মোরালো রে, শ্যামা মা কি আমার কালো।
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of the Spiritual Workshop. This is Arup K. Chatterjee, and you are listening to my co host, Surjo Bhattacharjee. Surjo, how are you?
I am fantastic, Arup. How are you?
Not bad at all. Surjo, I would like to ask you to introduce your thoughts on the Spiritual Workshop. Why are we here? What are we doing here? What do we intend to achieve from this podcast?
This actually is going to wind up being a little bit of a spiritual answer, I do believe. Something tells me that the energies around us at this present time are not as helpful as we would like them to be, or as helpful as they might be for us to progress the way we want to. And so we have decided to look for guidance and look for people who already have the answers. That's what we're going for. And I think the figure that we're going to speak about today, and we're going to speak about for the next quite a few episodes, is going to guide us. For me personally, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the guidance.
Um, I can't disagree with anything you said, Shurja, because I think that strikes a very special chord in my heart. For me, the spiritual workshop is quite literally a workshop, and it is where we enter uh, an unknown terrain, and also we enter ourselves. And the guidance that you are speaking about, I think it can have multiple meanings. It can have multiple sources. It can have multiple, repositories. I'm not sure who's going to guide me or guide us. I'm not sure where are we exactly going to find the guidance in the words of the guru or the devi or the goddess, whosoever we are approaching. Since you mentioned a book, I think it's important to uh, announce the name of this book, that is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, a
Yes.
book that resonates, or rather a name, a teacher, a guru whose name resonates with both of us.
Yes.
But I think it's very important for us to very humbly acknowledge and admit to our viewers, to ourselves, that we don't exactly know where or how deep we are going with this book. It's like a forest. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna was written by Master Moshai, who's very humbly left himself in that initial M, and
Yes.
it was completed around the very, very late 19th century, and it went into translation around 1911, 1912. The English translation of the book is what we are going to refer to, and it is over 500 or 600 pages long. So I think it's going to take us a very, very long time, Shurjo.
Yes. 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 Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
So why don't we try and understand, try and explore that aspect that you spoke about? The keyword guidance. What do you mean by guidance, and what do you mean by these all these energies that seem to be perturbing you a bit?
Life with time has a specific way of communicating difficulty. And over the years, I have turned to, like you said, there are several repositories. You don't know where you will find guidance, answers, something to hold on to, the straw to clutch on to. So over the years, I've had so many of those. Of course, you being my friend know that I lean very heavily on the Mahabharata for the same purposes. It is the calm within the storm. That is a sort of guidance that helps me get through the day in the manner in which I want to get through the day. I want to maintain integrity. I want to maintain certain standards of behavior, for example, that my parents would be proud of. Not always easy to do when there's a lot of opportunities for shortcuts and misbehaviors and whatnot. I lean on these things to keep me on the straight and narrow, so to speak. And Sri Ramakrishna, from our very childhood, I'm sure, even for you, has been a perennial figure, someone who we have looked at with awe. And over time, the more we have learnt about him, the awe goes beyond. His deeds are nearly supernatural, or certainly supernatural to me. If I am the barometer for what is natural, he is supernatural. What he was able to attain and achieve, this is not for the mere mortal at all. But then all indications are that that's what he was. That unbelievable dichotomy and the bridge that he was able to walk across. All of us are seeking it. I'm sure if I had that bridge at my disposal where I could connect to the divine, I don't think I'd be having as many mental problems. I don't mean to sound like woe is me or whatever. Life is good and everything. But life is good, it comes at a cost. That's what I'm referring to. So I don't think that I'd be having even the problems with the cost, let's say, if I had access to what he had access to, if any of us had access to what he had access to. That's what I'm referring to.
I think it is a very nice kind of an entry point at this threshold. I think I must also sort of clarify to myself, to my co-host, that is you, Shurjo, to whosoever is listening to us, that what we mean by a spiritual workshop, or certainly what I mean by a workshop, is a factory indeed, a place where a lot of mining happens, a lot of exploration happens, a lot of cognition and metacognition happens, a lot of discovery, seeking, introspection. Certainly, all those things that are related to mental health and mental well being, which are today's buzzwords. But it's also about discovering that invisible bridge that I believe we still share with people like with souls like Sri Ramakrishna. The book that we are going to, for lack of a better word, study, hopefully across the next several months, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna was originally written as Kathamrita, which means the nectar of his words. And when it was published um, for after it went through several editions, it was republished in 1942 with this new foreword by Aldous Huxley. And Shurjo, I was wondering if it is a good idea for me to read the foreword, and let me see how you respond to the foreword. So Aldous Huxley was a cultural commentator and somebody deeply interested in the history of religions, and he was also deeply inspired by Sri Ramakrishna and the Vedanta tradition that Sri Ramakrishna stimulated through the vehicle of Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda, and the Belur Math establishment, and the Ramakrishna order, which is affiliated to the Shankaracharya order, by the way. Now, so do you think it's a good idea for me to go through the forward? It's a very short one,
Absolutely. This is the best place to begin.
So we are beginning right from the very, very beginning. Although, I
Absolutely.
mean, we are not reading the 19th century Bengali version. We are not going through the first English translation, but the book hasn't gone through too many corrections over the ages. And as many, many commentators and critics, even Marxist critics who do not have too much, who do not seem to have too much uh, stated affiliation with religious matters, have gone on to compliment Master Moshai's prose as extremely urbane and very wholesome and very, very modernistic and indeed very modern. So Master Moshai's prose is something that Aldous Huxley will also be talking about in his foreword. He writes, and I read: In the history of the arts, genius is a thing of very rare occurrence. Rarer still, however, are the competent reporters and recorders of that genius. The world has had many hundreds of admirable poets and philosophers, but of these hundreds, only a very few have had the fortune to attract a Boswell or an Eckermann. Boswell and Eckermann were both 18th to very, very early 19th century biographers. When we leave the field of art for that of spiritual religion, very interesting choice of phrase here. He calls it spiritual religion. When we leave the field of art for that of spiritual religion, the scarcity of competent reporters becomes even more strongly marked. Of the day to day life of the great theocentric saints and contemplatives, we know, in the great majority of cases, nothing whatsoever. Many, it is true, have recorded their doctrines in writing, and a few, such as Saint Augustine, the third to fourth century Christian mystic, Suzo, 13th century Christian mystic, Saint Teresa, about 16th century roughly, Spanish female mystic. These have left us autobiographies of the greatest value. But all doctrinal writing is in some measure formal and impersonal, while the autobiographer tends to omit what he regards as trifling matters and suffers from the further disadvantage of being unable to see how he strikes other people and in what way he affects their lives. M, within quotes, as the author modestly styles himself, was peculiarly qualified for this task, that is, not to omit the quote unquote trifling details, and essentially he was very authentic, at least according to Aldous Huxley. To a reverent love for his master, to a deep and experiential knowledge of that master's teaching, he added a prodigious memory for the small happenings of each day and a happy gift for recording them in an interesting and realistic way. Making good use of his natural gifts and of the circumstances in which he found himself, M produced a book unique so far as my knowledge goes in the literature of hagiography. No other saint has had so able and indefatigable a Boswell, that is a biographer. Never have the small events of a contemplative's daily life been described with such a wealth of intimate detail. Never have the casual and unstudied utterances of a great religious teacher been set down with such minute a fidelity. To Western readers, it is true this fidelity and this wealth of detail are sometimes a trifle disconcerting, because for the social, religious, and intellectual frames of reference within which Sri Ramakrishna did his thinking and expressed his feelings were entirely Indian. And as Surjo, you might want to add, they were to a large extent Bengali.
Yes.
Yes.
But
Yes,
That's
that's
the
the
after
one
one
the
I got
few
that.
surprises, but after the first few surprises and bewilderments, we begin to find something peculiarly stimulating and instructive about the very strangeness and, to our eyes, the eccentricity of the man revealed to us in M's narrative. Something that you call supernatural is here being identified by Huxley as eccentricities. What a scholastic philosopher would call the accidents, within quotes, of Ramakrishna's life were intensely Hindu, and therefore, so far as we in the West are concerned, unfamiliar, and hard to understand. Its essence, within quotes, however, was intensely mystical and therefore universal. To read through these conversations, in which mystical doctrine alternates with an unfamiliar kind of humor, and where discussions of the oddest aspects of Hindu mythology give place to the most profound and subtle utterances about the nature of ultimate reality, is in itself a liberal education in humility, tolerance, and a suspense of judgment. We must be grateful to the translator, that is Swami Nikhilananda. We must be grateful to the translator for his excellent version of a book so curious and delightful as a biographical document, so precious at the same time for what it teaches us of the life of the spirit. That is the end of a very, very short foreword to a very, very long book. Shurja, what do you think about this foreword?
So interesting that it has been written and expressed in this manner from the very beginning. The lack of genius, then the further lack of people who would, without their own personal judgment, write about the genius if they had access to their life in a biographical sense, let's say. Now, here then he praises M, Master Moshe, who has written about his master, whose daily activities he was privy to, but which he didn't judge and use his own judgment for, or this might not be worthy of reading for any disciple or for anyone who wants to read it in the first place. It's done through great purity and devotion. This is his life. This is all his life. There was joy in all of it, which is a part of what Sri Ramakrishna's teachings were anyway. You find the joy and your devotion in all your activities. You find your spiritualism in all your activities, and M has basically not left any of it out. Now, he's also spoken a little bit to the attitude of the Western scholar who will call the spiritual experience of someone not from the West, will call it an eccentricity or an accident, and sort of rationalize it again to where it looks like their movements or their theology, religion, mysticism, whatever it is a cut above. It's fair enough. It's something that I think we've seen for 500 years or something like that. I think they're quite capable of that. But it's also pointed out here. It's been quite bluntly put forth that this is what they do, so it's fine. But also at the same time, talking about that this is a truly Indian experience. Someone from the West will not really know. Cultural things actually don't translate. Yes, mysticism translates, as he said, it's universal. It translates. Devotion translates. Things like that. But cultural things they do not translate. Someone else's culture, when they're the truth of their culture, for example, what would come across odd and queer to us, and vice versa. It takes an impartial mind to be open minded to all sorts. And I'm glad that Aldous Huxley was in his foreword something that is not from his culture, but he is willing to look at the positives and enjoy and believe. Major part of faith is that is the belief of it. So I fantastic. What a way to start. Brilliant.
I think it's very interesting that while he does not talk about belief at all, or at least in my reading, in my present cognition, it seems like he's probably not talking about belief, although he's conveying that impression through his writing, certainly. So that impression cannot be retracted. But what he, to quote him, is talking about is suspense of judgment. So while belief could be a positive category of mental activity or spiritual, let's say, faith in something, it's very interesting that he's taking the neti neti approach. That is not this, not this, which is a core fundamental value activity related to Vedanta, the Upanishads. The Upanishads
Yeah.
are the the end of the Vedas, or the cutting
Yeah.
edge of the Vedas, as one philosopher called Arindam Chakraborty has called them of late. But by end of the Vedas, it doesn't mean that you'll find them at the end of a book called the Vedas, because there is no publisher who publishes the Vedas, as it were.
Yes.
The Upanishads were in general written by people, and now when I use the phrase written by people, then that itself can become controversial. But they were
Yes.
generally conceived of by visionaries, let's say people who were the vehicles um, of receiving uh, the surreal or the non-terrestrial messages.
Yeah.
They were conceiving of these messages at a generally later portion of their lives. So the Upanishads are of a more mature, non-theistic nature. They are about spiritual
Yes.
meditations. They're about aham brahmasmi and tattvamasi. I am he. I am. I mean, the supreme power is within me. Not that I am the supreme power.
Yeah.
That would be hugely problematic. But yeah, I really appreciate what you were saying about Aldous Huxley, that he has the tenacity, the foresight, and what he calls the suspense of judgment. Essentially, it is that: do not judge, enjoy. And if you can't enjoy spiritual truths, enjoy Master Moshai's prose, because that prose is born of spiritual activity, as you have so rightly said. So if you don't want to come to a spiritual workshop, at least stand outside and observe what that workshop produces. And in Master Moshai's case, it produced this beautiful social historiography, if not the higher truths that Shurja, you and I are trying to seek, but at least it produces history, it produces diaries, it produces information, which is so delightfully told. Master Moshai actually was, as we will come to discover, he was, literally a master. He was a headmaster. He worked in several colleges and schools. He also worked with Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and he had these very high, quote unquote, eccentric principles. So he wouldn't stick in one place for a very long time, but people had a very high regard for him. But he had the ego of learning, and that ego of his knowledge, his learning, his scholasticism gets crushed at the feet
Right.
of Sri Ramakrishna.
Yes.
And then his spiritual evolution actually begins, which is why his whole approach to the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, or Kathamrita, is exceedingly humble. You cannot recognize the previous Master Moshai from this one, and that's also indeed very valuable for us.
It's extremely valuable, and I understand the position that Aldous Huxley is in, because if the book is translated in English, it is hopefully to reach the reader in England. Because if the readers in Bengali already know Bangla, here they'll just read it. It's fine. So then he has to cover it in a manner appropriate. So when someone reads the first page, they go like, "All right, fine, something suspense of judgment. All right, I, sure, sure." It's something else. Again, it's part of the exotic East. Here's a mystic who's had these amazing experiences. Let's just read it for that. Let's just read it for literature rather than spiritual import. Now, if we get spiritual import along the way, fantastic. We import anything from there in the first place. You know, I wonder. It's a wondrous job, like because he has to walk that line. It is something that he's endorsing. He has to make sure that his endorsement counts. The publishers also will be like, "Sir Huxley, please write a forward." All right, I have to write a forward in a manner that people are actually going to be interested to read it after that. So fair enough. To each his own.
I would be a trifling more charitable in my approach, because while yes, I share your skepticism towards the Western readership, because I mean, West is a hugely vague term, but suppose I take Victorian England, I don't find absolute heartwarming sympathy from the Victorian administration towards Indian spiritual practices, but I do not find apathy either. And there's somebody called Max Muller, who's a German scholar and who lives in Oxford in the 19th century. And Swamiji gets to meet Max Muller in the late 19th century. And it's actually Max Muller who begins, Max Muller and Edwin Arnold. Edwin Arnold writes The Light of Asia. Max Muller writes the Sacred Books of the East, which contain also the Upanishads. Both get published in 1879. So 19th century is when the hegemony of Trinitarian values, Christian Orthodox Christian values, are beginning to see a demise. Not simply because Darwin has said origin of species is completely organic and natural, but I
Yeah.
mean that is definitely one of the many factors. Marxism is another. So I think Max Muller has, with his alliance with Swami Vivekananda, he paves the way in a sense for the Ramakrishna order, and that essentially, by the way, Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, was deeply interested in theosophy, which is another distant ally of the Vedantic tradition. So
Yeah.
a lot of very illustrious 19th century British thinkers were turning towards non-dualist or Advaitic traditions, which do not differentiate between the supernatural God and the natural beings. Having said that, you are absolutely right. I don't think the quote-unquote Western reader in 1942, when it's World War II, would be thinking so deeply and in such a complex way. So for them, it is suspense of judgment. Okay, let me suspend judgment. Okay, it's not spiritual, it's not certainly mystical, because those guys aren't capable of mysticism. It's we who produce the saints, but let me read it anyway for social historiography. And at least there, this book begins to succeed in Huxley's foreword. If not the big things
Absolutely.
that you and I are after, and hopefully will find.
Well, that is fine because that's for them. This is for us. It's all right. It's all about making the right gateway to enter. I think Aldous Huxley did that. We are here as well at the gateway of the book. And in subsequent episodes, we're going to delve right in and learn.
I wonder if you would allow me to sing a couple of lines before we
Please go
end
ahead.
today's episode, Shurju, and I would very much
Absolutely.
hope that you hum it after me. That is after I've hummed the first couple of lines, because we are both, in a manner of speaking, students in the Kali Bhakti tradition that Ramakrishna so wonderfully popularized in the Vedantic tradition. I think we are both learners. We do not pretend to be scholars. And in music, Shurja, I know others know you as a guitarist, songwriter, professional musician, but I know you as a constant student, a constant gardener. So I suppose I would like to imitate you. I'll sing a couple of lines and maybe you
Go
could
ahead.
hum it after me.
I'll do my best.
মনরে কৃষিকাজ জানো না. For those who are listening without access to the Bengali language, the song I'm going to hum from a couple of lines actually means, "O heart, O soul, O spirit, you do not know farming. If only you knew it, if only you could trust the name of Kali, you'd be a much better, much more evolved, uh, much more contented, and spiritually recognizable person." So, মনেরে কৃষিকাজ জানো না, মনেরে কৃষিকাজ জানো না, এমন মানব জমিন রইল পতি, আবাদ করলে ফলতো সোনা, মনরে কৃষিকাজ জানো না, মনরে কৃষি কাজ জানো না।
Wonderful, Arup. That's a lovely singing voice. মন রে কৃষি কাজ জানো না, মন রে কৃষি কাজ জানো না।
क्या बात है। On that, well, I don't know what to say. I just got lost in Shurjo's last tunes. But on that note, quite literally, this is Arup K. Chatterjee and Shurjo Bhattacharjee signing off, and hope to see you very, very soon on another episode of the Spiritual Workshop.
Ciao.
Ciao.